The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So thank you all for coming. It's a really, dare I use the word, special ceremony, but I think it is. You know, we all have great gratitude for Reverend Master Jiyu. And as most of you know, she died in 1996, actually November 6th. I had a double hernia surgery that morning, so it's triply implanted in my body and mind. And if my math is correct, this is the 16th anniversary of her death, what we would call her parinirvana. Okay. And in last week's Dharma talk, Reverend Master Mayon mentioned that it's possible now that not all of us knew Reverend Master Jiyu and didn't have that opportunity to meet her. Sometimes you say that you can tell a lot about the Master by their disciples. So we've got disciples and grand disciples, and lots of lay practitioners who've been at it for many, many years. I had the good fortune of being with her at Shasta Abbey from 1973, when I first came as a lay practitioner, to 1996 when she died. And after someone has died, and especially if that person left a big legacy or was a very dynamic person, time, stories about that person, the great devotion that people have about that person, the great gratitude that they have, they can have a way of making that person bigger than life. In many ways, her master was a very big person, but she wasn't bigger than life. Her memories, to me, are someone who is very much a human being. She didn't want to be deified. She didn't like that kind of respect. She had false teeth, and if she thought people were deifying her or kind of putting her at a place where she didn't think was good, she'd take out her teeth to show them how human she was. So, if you knew her, I think you would say, I will say, that she was a very human being. Okay? She didn't claim to be perfect. I think she did the very best she could to spread the Dharma in the West. She was a pioneer. I'm biased, okay? But I will go so far to say that she did a remarkable job in doing so, in bringing the Dharma to the West and adapting, as she saw in time, was good. And of course, in that, she kind of felt, this is what I can do. You have to take it from here. Okay? She always made a point, like the Dalai Lama does, of saying that I'm a very simple monk. Just continue on in training, trying to help beings who want to be helped, and primarily training herself. Okay? She was both kind and compassionate, and she could be direct and to the point. I received both types of teachings from her, and the learning continues to this day. I didn't understand everything that she taught. I didn't have her experience, But as she often taught us, I tried to just let it simmer on the back burner. So as time goes on, I find myself saying, that's why she did that. So it is. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about this morning is a couple teachings that she gave. One was in the OBC Journal, article that she wrote. Another one was just a very, very short comment that she made. that has really stuck with me. And I think that they demonstrate her great compassion and her great wisdom in a very human way. So years ago, I don't know, it could have been in the late 70s, 80s, I'm not sure when, in the journal, she wrote an article. This is the Journal of the Order of Buddhist Contemplatives, entitled Compassion for the Abbot. Okay. Let me preface this by saying and assuring everyone that I'm not talking about compassion right now because I feel that we're not very compassionate to Reverend Master Mayon. It just has nothing to do with that. Nor in her absence do I feel that I'm having difficulties with people with lack of compassion towards me. I'm not. But there's something about this teaching, and let me explain. So in both the teachings that I'm going to talk about, I feel that it's an example of someone whose insight and compassion was broad and demonstrated an ability to look at matters in a unique and helpful way. You know, that's that ability to sometimes look outside of the box, because we can get really tunnel vision for lots of good reasons. You know, lots of good causes, we get tunnel vision. Okay. That being said, in Compassion for the Abbot, Reverend Master talks about the very famous Zen story of Nansen's cat. Okay, and Nansen, that's the Japanese. I'm not even trying to attempt to pronounce the Chinese because I don't do it very well. But Nansen is the Japanese name for this monk. And Nansen lived in China from 748 until 835. Okay, it's a long time ago. At the time of this story that has been passed on to this very day, and I use story in the sense of it could be true. I don't know. Well, at this time, he was the abbot of a quite large temple, and I think there were a lot of monks there, possibly, from what I gather from the little story. So the story goes that the monks of the eastern and western halls, this is what makes me think there are a fair amount of monks there, if there's an eastern hall and a western hall. Okay? The monks of the eastern and western halls were arguing about a cat. Okay? And Nansen, the abbot, picked up the cat and said, "Say the appropriate word and the cat will be saved. If you don't say the appropriate word, then it gets cut in two." The monks didn't say anything. Okay? These monks that had been quarreling, I don't know, were they dumbfounded? Whatever, they couldn't say anything. Nansen cut the cat in two. Later, Joshu is Nansen's disciple. So later he returns, this is after the incident, from outside. I don't know if he was out of the temple or just not there when this happened. And Nansen tells Joshu what transpired, that he cut the cat in two. And, that there was this argument, and he tried something, and this is what happened. So Joshu, at this point, removes his sandals. He places his sandals on his head, and he walks out. It's often said that he went out. I think that has some kind of meaning, the went out, because I went back and looked at Nansen, probably at one point walked out on his teacher. Not walked out goodbye, but there was some kind of interchange, and he walked out. Didn't say anything, just walked out. So Nansen walks out. Joshu, I get these two confused. Joshu walks out. So Nansen's disciple, sandals on his head, he walks out. So then Nansen, kind of calling after him, says, "If you had been there, the cat would have been saved." So this is a very famous Zen story. Okay? It's in 101 Zen koans by Paul Reps, way long ago. Many of us saw. It's in commentaries. And it's studied to this very day. So there are lots of commentaries on this story. And as I said, if it actually happened, it happened a long time ago, like 1,200 years ago. If you're a cat lover, the thought of a cat being cut in two, oh, that's awful. Awful. Okay? It's horrifying. Okay? In my looking around a bit in the commentaries and various things written on this, Joshu's putting his sandals on his head and going out has some different meanings. In some of the commentaries, it's said that the sandals on the head are a sign of mourning. I guess mourning what Nansen had done. And some say that what Joshua was doing in putting his sandals on his head and walking out, this was an expression of standing outside the wheel of birth and death. He's trying to take it to this deeper place. So I've not studied these stories. I've not studied, these commentaries. I've really not studied these stories. And I do not claim to know a lot about Chinese customs and nuances, because I think that's important usually in understanding these. The part about this, and I think you have to put aside the horror of the cat being cut in two here. Okay, so you put that aside. Okay, was what Reverend Master Jiyu's comments about this in her article called "Compassion for the Abbot." Let me read this. It's going to be part of the article. Okay. A trainee said to me this morning that it was a pity that Joshu did not have more compassion for his abbot. So actually, it was somebody here that brought this to Reverend Master Jiyu. Okay. Joshu was the abbot Nansen's assistant. He actually is a very famous monk. He's a very, very good monk. Left a great legacy. It was Nansen and not his assistant who was trying to teach a bunch of trainees who did not know the reality of Zen. And it was Nansen, not his assistant, who found himself holding a cat and saying, "Do something. Stop quarreling or I will have to kill it." Okay. We all know, this is Reverend Master Jiyu talking, not me. We all know that hindsight is an exact science. So it is easy for Joshu to tell his abbot, "You should have cut the cat in one," implying, "I am so much superior to you." This is interesting. And for Dogen to say, because Dogen comments about this, at least in one place, and I'm sure in other places. So, what should you say here? And for Dogen to say he should have kept the cat in one, I would have let it go magnificently. Joshu had at least half a day to think about his reaction, and Dogen had several hundred years, while Nansen was faced with an instant decision. There must have been things going on at the monastery at the time, because Reverend Master continues. I am thinking of starting a Compassion for Abbots Club with myself and an abbot friend in England as its first members. I think this was an abbot at a Catholic monastery in England that she corresponded with. People do not realize that one has no alternative at times, but to match one's teaching to what is in the trainee's mind without trying any sort of manipulation whatsoever. What do you do with a bunch of people who are having a fight in the kitchen? So I think she thinks the fight was going on in the kitchen, which means that they have got big knives over a cat. So maybe there was a lot more knives going on here. One cannot expect them, when the abbot says, "Say a word of Zen," to immediately say, "Oh, Holy Master, we understand completely. Let the cat go." Saints are rare in every day and age. Nansen's monks were in a foul temper. One cannot expect the sort of response that came from Joshu, who had time to think and not be in a temper. What about some compassion for the abbot's humanity? He felt terrible about what he had done. It is very easy for Dogen and Joshu to be right after the event. And she continues on a little bit later. The most beautiful thing about the Nansen story is the genuine humility of going to Joshu and saying, gosh, I did this awful thing and they have missed the point. You can really feel what Nansen is going through, because he is feeling genuinely sorry for the cat. Joshu, putting his slippers on his head, is being superior. He is one up on the abbot. However, the abbot then shows him true compassion when he says, if you had been there, the cat would have lived. I wonder if anybody has really heard what Nansen was saying here. It is much more than it seems. So I will leave you, if you'd like, to study that koan. You can see pictures of Nansen's cat on the internet now. So it's in our age where it's all out there. There's some good information, okay? And it's, as I say, it's in a lot of Zen books, and people have written commentaries about it and given talks about it. Okay, so at this point in time, when Reverend Master wrote this article and making these comments, she felt that sympathy and compassion for those in leadership roles who have to make difficult, immediate decisions is an important dimension of the mind and heart of training at this particular time when she wrote this article. I actually heard from one of the other monks who knows much more than I about these koan stories that at another time she said something else. And she made certain, comments about Nansen. Maybe wondering why he had to cut the cat. Anyway, I don't think that's a contradiction to make a comment at one time and a comment at the other. Sometimes teachings have to be suited to the present conditions. Okay? It's what's appropriate at the time. So in Buddhism, as you know, we show respect and gratitude to our teachers, elders, leaders, parents. They offer us so much. Okay? And they often make great personal sacrifices in doing this. I had a philosophy teacher in the university I went to who said that parents should be allowed to take their first child and put them back in the womb and start again. Because he said, they don't, you can't get it from a book. You make your mistakes. And as I said, with Nansen, Reverend Master wasn't saying how glorious he cut the cat in two. It was a mess. Okay. Those in positions of elders, leaders, teachers, parents, in a sense, need to earn their respect. Okay? And you earn that by how you are. If you're kind and compassionate and you minimize the goofs and learn from your mistakes, then people will accord us the respect that they'll accord us. And if you act inappropriately, you can lose that respect. And that's understandable. Okay. Well, I want to say also that the fact of the matter is that everybody makes mistakes. It's just the way it is. I think Reverend Master Jiyu made mistakes. I heard it a few times say, I made a mistake. As I said, Reverend Master Jiyu was not condoning the cutting of the cat. Nansen gets the karmic consequences of his actions. I think what Reverend Master Moore is looking at is Joshu's reaction, and that maybe a little compassion instead of some great Zen action, which might have been what you did, but maybe rather than that, just a little bit of sympathy and compassion might have been helpful. So for me, this teaching of Reverend Masters is one of looking out for nonsense humanity. Okay? How can we give expression to what needs to be said in a compassionate way that looks from the eyes of a Buddha? That looks bigger. And I think that's, I'd say for at least for me, that's a teaching that to this day, I just think is really important. How I look at things. Okay? It's interesting because at the time of the Buddha, there's an incident called the quarrel at Kosambi. Okay, Kosambi was a town, and this is my short version of what's in the Pali Canon. So you can get the details if you look up quarrel at Kosambi. So what happened? There were two monks at this monastery place, and who were having a bit of a time with each other. And one of them was an expert on the discipline, and the other was an expert on the doctrine. And they just, they were like colliding all the time. And it also happens that when this quarrel comes about, the Buddha is at residence at this place. One of the monks did something that was at least a small indiscretion. He left something somewhere we shouldn't have left it, with something in it. And the other monk kind of went to him and said, do you realize you made a mistake here? And the monk said, no, I didn't make a mistake. And there started this argument between the two of them. And then, probably because they were experts on the doctrine and the discipline, the other monks in residence started to side up. Okay, and there's this big quarrel going on. And they're kind of yelling at each other and having a time of it. And the Buddha hears this, and he tries to talk to them sensibly and offers advice. They don't hear it, and so he goes away. So then somebody comes to the Buddha and pleads with him, will you go talk to these people? You talk to these monks and have them stop the quarrel. So he tries again. And this time one of the monks says to him, basically, go away, we'll settle this ourselves. This is not for you. I don't know. So what the Buddha does, I think he goes out for his alms food. He comes back. He gets his bowl, he gets his robe, and he just starts walking. He's out the gate. And he's fed up, and he's heading to the jungle to be alone. So on the way to the jungle, there are some smaller communities of monks that he passes by, and it just happens that they're living in harmony. And he asks them, why this is, and they say, because basically we're trying to get along, we try to help each other, we assume the best. But the Buddha, he talks for him a bit, and then he moves on, because he's going to the jungle, he's fed up. And he's pretty unhappy about the quarrel at Kosambi, because it could make a split in the order. Okay. So he gets to the jungle, and he's very happy. He's away from these arguing monks. He's just there on his own, and he's happy. He's peaceful. Well, then happened along this elephant, who has kind of the same problem that the Buddha has. This elephant is fed up with the other elephants because they've been giving it a really bad time. Actually, it's him or her, I don't know. A bad time. And it's just left all the elephants and gone to the jungle. And they both meet up under the sala tree. And I think the elephant kind of looks out for the Buddha, and probably vice versa. And they just stay there, very harmoniously. Okay. So back at Kosambi, the lay supporters at this training place, they're not so happy about the Buddha leaving here, and they want to get some teaching from the Buddha, and they're not happy about the quarrel. So they decide they're not going to feed the monks anymore. And I think it's when they're in their rains retreat, so the monks are stuck there, and they're not getting food. Okay, so in a while they go after Ananda. Somebody finds Ananda somewhere and asks, will you go talk to the Buddha? And can we work this out? This is not a good situation. So Ananda finds the Buddha and says, can you help them? And out of his compassion, he's now not, I think, probably settled down a bit. He says, okay, they can come here, I'll talk with them. So in a while they come, he talks with them, they work it out, and it's okay. Things go back a little bit more to normal. Okay? So, these things happen. They happen in monasteries, they happened at the time of the Buddha. Fortunately, they worked it out. Okay. So before I talk about the second teaching of River Master, I want to tell you just a short humorous story about a cat in Shasta Abbey. I mean, we have lots of cats, and we've had lots of cats over the years, but this one happens to be about, and as far as I know, this is a true story. It happened long ago, but one of the monks went into town to pick up someone at the bus station. There used to be a bus station in Mount Shasta. And when they got out of the car, this is the monk got out of the car to go into the station to get the person, a cat darted under the car. Okay, so the monk went in to get the person in the bus station, and they came out and they said to the person, "Is the cat under the car?" And the person thought that this was some kind of a koan. And I don't actually remember what happened from there, where they actually were able to convince the person that they just were worried about cat being under the car. So these things happen. Okay. So the second teaching that River Master Jiyu gave has to do with the second teaching that I remember well, has to do with the Buddha's parinirvana. If you've ever seen a picture or read an account of the scene of the Buddha's death, he's lying there, and there's all these people there, and people from all dimensions there, but there are people wailing, crying. People are really upset because the Buddha has died. Not everyone, but some people are crying. So on one occasion, I heard Reverend Master Jiyu say, maybe the ones that are crying are the enlightened ones. I thought, how interesting. That's a really different way of looking at that scene. In the text, the elders who are there at the Buddha's death say that formations are impermanent. How could it be that what is born, come to being, formed and bound to fall, should not fall? That is not possible. And I think they were trying to help those that were crying. And Ananda, before the Buddha's death, when he realized the Buddha is really going to die, he just goes off and sobs. And, the Buddha actually comes to him and says, it's okay, Ananda. I mean, this is the consequence of living. And I've lived long enough. My body is falling apart. I need to die. So I don't know. I just found that really struck me, the fact that maybe the ones that are crying are the enlightened ones. Your master used to say that when someone close to you passes, it's very natural that grief and sadness arise, and they may be there for a year or two. I mean, they're there with you. And I think crying, sadness, grief, they're human emotions. There's nothing wrong with them. Also, I think it's important, as long as we don't, that we not hold on to them, that we not stir them up. Okay? Because if we approach them from the mind of meditation, they fade. They go more to the background, and still there may be a slight sadness there. Okay? So I don't know. I thought those were two very good teachings he gave, and they're very, to me, very human teachings, because we're always going to be human beings, and we can do our best to always become Buddha.